So welcome everyone. So two things to start off with. Firstly, I'm really impressed with this conference. I've been here 2 days now, and I think firstly, Esther and the team deserve a round of applause. And secondly, how many people saw my keynote yesterday morning? It was also early. Okay, that's good, because there's a tiny bit of repetition, though not too much, hopefully. So my name's David Green, and I've been in the people analytics space for around 6 years now, and I've seen it grow from what was something almost on the periphery of HR to something that's now very much core. And certainly the conversations I was having with some of you in the room next door at lunchtime, this shows the interest around this space and how it's growing, certainly in India as well. Here we are. So we go there. So firstly, I thought, before we dive in a little bit, and I'm going to get you guys to take a short survey, so have your phones at the ready. I hope it will be fun, in about 4 or 5 slides' time. So firstly, this is some of the ways in which companies are using data, people data, to help support business decisions and people outcomes as well. And I think this is the key thing around this. There's been a lot of talk around people analytics for a number of years. And I think too much has focused on the business outcomes and not enough on the benefit to employees as well. And I think that's starting to change. And that one of the trends I put up in the slides yesterday was this whole thing around employee expectations are changing. And employees are expecting similar experience at work as to that they get as consumers. They want things personalized. They want to receive insights about their own data to help them perform better and strike a better work-life balance. And you can't do any of that without decent data, and you can't do any of that without analytics. So we're going to talk about some of those examples now, but a couple that I highlighted yesterday. I used to work at IBM, and when IBM got started with people analytics, the first business challenge that it sought to solve was a problem with attrition. It was back in 2010, 2 years after the financial crisis, and suddenly it was starting to lose some of its best performers and most important people. So they used analytics to put a flight risk model together, and they've used that ever since, and that has helped save IBM around $300 million during that time. I read an article recently with Laszlo Bock. He was reflecting on his time at Google, and he was talking about how a small change they made in the onboarding process to really help new hires settle quicker helped Google make about an extra $400 million in a year and reduce attrition. So these can make big differences to organizations. So I'm not surprised about this statistic now, having talked to so many of you at lunchtime. But research shows that large organizations, those with 10,000 employees or more, 69% of them now have a people analytics team. I think some of those people analytics teams aren't really doing analytics yet, they're just doing reporting. But it shows that the ambition is there, and actually they're probably doing the reporting in a way that provides insight to managers and people in the business to help them do their jobs better. And then some research around, so not surprisingly, more companies doing people analytics, more people working in people analytics roles within organizations. This is some research that LinkedIn published a year ago that showed a 70% increase in people on LinkedIn in the APAC region who listed HR analytics or people analytics as a skill. Quite significant, similar growth around the world as well. And the statistic on the right was an increase in a single year in the EMEA region of 61%. On the company that I work with, we have a website, myhrfuture.com, and we did some research last year, actually the end of last year, and as part of that, we asked employees, and you can download the report for free by doing that scan me thing there, the QR code. We did some research last year. We asked an open text question to people responding, if there was one skill that you could learn next year, what would it be? And this was HR professionals responding, and most of them said people analytics, as you can see. But it was interesting that the 6 skills that they did suggest were harder stuff like people analytics and workforce planning, technology and change stuff for digital HR and design thinking, but also soft skills like consulting and influencing and stakeholder management. And I think that really signifies the importance that in HR, we are also business people. We need to understand the business. And if we want change to happen within our organizations, we need to be better at engaging at stakeholders, and we need to be better at influencing them to make decisions as well. On the right, you'll see that some people said none. So there are some HR professionals out there who believe that they don't need to learn anything. So I'd like to meet some of those. I think in this changing world we're in, we always need to learn. So questions, when we were setting up the organization, as I said, we're working with about 60 organizations globally now and helping them put people analytics at the center of their business. And when Jonathan Farrar and I, one of the other co-founders, we were reflecting last year, what are the questions that we typically get asked? And I got lots of questions at lunchtime. And when we actually started categorizing these questions, we generally were speaking, look, it's a chief HR officer, or it's a new head of people analytics, or an existing head of people analytics. How can I improve my impact within an organization? You know, my impact for CHR, how can I improve the impact of HR? How, head of people analytics, how can I improve the impact of analytics within an organization? How can I create more value? How can I create more ROI for the work that I'm doing from an analytics perspective? And what should I focus on? Because there's so many different things I could focus on. I could be going out and trying to source a technology vendor. I could be cleaning data, spending time investing in that. I could be hiring and building a team, or I could be getting a bunch of expensive consultants in to try and tell me how to do it. What should I focus on? So from that, we developed a model. We call it the 9 dimensions for excellence in people analytics. And we built this based on our work with over 100 organizations around the world. And we came to 3 categories. And we're going to go into detail on this tomorrow. We're going to go into detail on this tomorrow on the workshop that we're doing, or that I'm doing. We're going to focus on some of these now. And this is basically something that we run with our clients, and it's all about having the right foundation in place. That comes from governance, so data standards, data management, who has access to the data, even having a common dictionary between HR and finance, so when someone's talking about turnover, we know what we're talking about, yeah? Because I think with that is some of the confusion that we get at times as well. What's the definition of an FTE? You won't believe the arguments that I've heard going on about that between different functions within the business. We'll talk about methodology in a minute. We're going to talk a little bit around some of the skills and stuff. But this is something that we created. And what we're going to do now as part of this masterclass, so we're going to look at 7 questions of that. There's a whole survey behind that is those 9 dimensions. And there's about 90 different questions. So we're not going to go through those because that would be a bit boring. But we are going to pick 7 out. And we're going to go through each of these in a minute. But if you scan that code, you can actually take that survey yourselves. It takes about 1 or 2 minutes. So I'll just pause for about 30 seconds whilst you scan that code. And I'll carry on talking while you're completing the survey. It's quite easy to complete. And what you will get, if you leave your details, you'll get an email just to show you how you performed and against a benchmark, and maybe give you a few little tips around on people analytics. And don't worry, you won't be deluged with other mail as well. So the first one is around governance. Do you have a code of conduct for ethics and privacy within people analytics? And just to put some context around those 7 questions, those were the 7 areas that Jonathan and I identified in organizations that are doing really well with people analytics, that they had all of these things in place. And we'll walk through each of those now with a couple of examples of each of them. So the first one is around ethics and privacy. A lot of the questions I got at lunchtime, and a lot of questions, in fact, the question I had at the end of the presentation yesterday was, is this the right thing to do? I know, Hod, you talked about ethics this morning in your presentation. It was really thoughtful. Ultimately, this is about people data. This is about the data of the employees that work for our organization. So we need to treat it with sensitivity, and we need to treat it with care. So do you have a policy around that? And again, some of the organizations that we're working with that do this very well, they actually have an ethics council in place. So people from HR, people from people analytics, probably the chief legal officer or someone that's looking after privacy in there. Maybe representatives from the should be a representative from the employee side as well. And its aim is to work out what data we're going to collect, why we're going to collect it, and then being very transparent about that, and also transparent about what the benefit is for the organization and the employees themselves. Because people, and there was a study which I think I might be about to show here, Accenture carried out earlier this year, and it's very interesting finding. I'm not going to go into all of these now, but 92% of employees are happy for their organizations to collect data about them as long as they get personal value from it. And again, that lends to the trend that I was talking at the start around employees, they don't, wanting a better experience at work and wanting stuff personalized for them. There's some other stats there that are quite interesting as well, and the one on the right-hand side is the calculation that Accenture made from the 600 largest publicly listed organizations in the world of the combined value that can be derived from data that's already in our systems, but by using it responsibly, the value that can potentially be created from that. And I'm sure we all want our share of that. But interestingly, when it comes to people analytics, this is a survey we did just over a year ago now, and we asked the question of people analytics leaders, how often are your projects jeopardized by concerns around ethics and privacy? And 81% of projects are jeopardized. So we need to get this right. It's something that's very important. In different parts of the world, because we have different laws around privacy and data as well, and many of you are working for global organizations, we particularly need to think about that. So just an example, this is, I did an interview earlier this year with Dawn Klinghoffer, who runs people analytics at Microsoft. She's been in that role for around 15 years, and they're certainly one of the organizations that not only are probably the most advanced when it comes to doing people analytics within their own organization, but also actually have the clearest philosophy around trust. And it really is around, as I said, being transparent. Why are you collecting the data? And being open about why you're collecting that data. Having a clear purpose around why you're collecting that, and an intention to act. There's no point collecting the data if you're not actually prepared to do something about it. So that's all part of the process really of deciding what you're going to do. And also, we need to look at the value. If we're going to do these projects, what is the benefit for the organisation? But what is the benefit for employees as well? So just to reiterate that, and they have a very clear policy around this, and definitely recommend. There's a link there to the article if you want to read it. Dawn goes into each of those 4 areas in a bit of depth. So again, the next one then is around prioritization. There's so much we can do, and I think some of the questions I got asked at lunchtime was, what should we do? And my answer is, actually focus on the stuff that's important to your individual organization. What are the most important things that you can potentially do? And I'm going to show a methodology for people analytics in a minute. And again, within IBM, that prioritization was a financial one. So actually, projects were prioritized if they had a minimum of a 50 million value to the organization. So that could be 50 million of saving, that could be 50 million of additional revenue. And that was one of the key criteria on deciding whether the team did actually undertook a project or not. Now, that was when the team had been established for 3 or 4 years. It could be a financial value, it could be something of strategic importance to the organization. Are all major projects sponsored by business leaders? So we have a mantra here, get a sponsor for every piece of analytics work. So this is someone within the business who has a problem, who recognizes they've got a problem, and wants to do something about it. They're curious about what the data and analytics can provide, and they actually want to take action on it. You can spend a lot of time in a people analytics role in HR, doing a lot of work, a lot of analysis. Some of these projects can take a long time to do. And then when you produce the findings, someone says, that's nice, and they're not prepared to do anything with it. So really understanding, getting to sponsors who will do something about it, who recognize they've got a problem, that it's an urgent problem that they want solved, is very, very important. And that's all part, again, I said this yesterday really, don't start with the data. I've seen so many people analytics projects fall down where people start with data. You give data to a team of analysts, they'll find something. They'll definitely find something, but it might not be important. And I've seen organizations do studies on attrition, for example, without even understanding whether attrition is a problem within their organization. They've built flight risk models. It's taken them 6 months to do it. They've perfected it. They go to the business and no one's interested because attrition is actually too low within the company. So really understanding your business, speaking to people, identifying stakeholders and sponsors in the business, framing those questions, but framing them in a way and building hypotheses around them as well. So actually the best way to do that is to probably walk through an example. So this is an example of Nielsen. So when Piyush Mehta, who actually used to run the business for Nielsen in India, he took on the role as head of people analytics, moved over to New York, and as part of understanding what project should I work on first, he interviewed some of the key stakeholders within the business and just said, what are the problems that you've got? What are the key challenges that you're facing today? And then he started to unpeel that from a people perspective. And one business leader who was running the consumer business in Nielsen said to Piyush, I think I've got a problem with attrition. Okay, so Piyush said. So he sat down with her and he said, okay, well, let's frame some business questions around that we can potentially answer with analytics. And those questions were, what factors make associates or employees more or less likely to leave? What could we do about it? And what is the financial impact? So she said, yeah, those would be great questions if you could go away and answer them. So the first thing he did in the team is they went away and they worked out that in this particular business unit, a 1% increase in attrition cost the business $5 million. So now this business leader was even more interested to find out what the answers to questions 1 and 2 were. So then Piyush and the team built some hypotheses. They looked at data themselves, but they also actually went out to people in the business, not just the business leader, but people in the business, managers in the business, and said, look, we know attrition's a problem, we know it's costing money, but why do you think people are leaving? And 2 hypotheses came back. One was around that female and diverse employees were more likely to leave, and another hypothesis that that employees that work remotely were more likely to leave than those that worked at a Nielsen office. So the great thing about analytics, you can test these hypotheses out. They found that the first one was false and the second one was true. But they also found something else that they didn't expect, and that's something else which is the beauty of analytics. They found that actually the real problem was around internal mobility. They found that employees who'd been in the same role for 3 years or more had a 46% higher chance of leaving than those who'd been in the same role for less than 3 years. They actually had an internal mobility program, but it had been poorly communicated and it was very underused. So first of all, they rejuvenated this program. They put it out there. They had leadership support. The CEO made talent reviews part of mobility reviews part of every quarterly talent review. And after 6 months, they'd reduced attrition. They'd saved $15 million. And they communicated this very well as well throughout the organization. So suddenly, other business units, other countries within Nielsen were coming to Piyush and the team saying, we've also got a problem with attrition. Can you help us? So it acted as because they communicated it so well as well, and there's a video around this particular project that I can send you a link to. Because they communicated it so well, they created momentum around analytics, and it was all about really solving the right business problem to start off with, getting a sponsor within the business who was prepared to take action, and then actually telling it in a story that compelled people to take action on it as well. So the next one is around foundation. Now, I've got a lot of chief HR officers in the room. Who's a chief HR officer in the room here? Good. So this one's talking to you. So does your chief HR officer invest in people analytics? Do they believe in it? Do they see it as a way to drive the function forward and help it deliver what it needs to deliver for the business? Because we really find that in organizations that have those CHROs, they are far more successful with people analytics. So I'll be completely honest with you. I tell people analytics leaders, if they tell me that they're struggling, I say, does your CHRO believe in this? Are they investing time in it? And if they say no, I say, well, obviously have a go at persuading them that it's important. But if they say that that's not the case, I say, well, you're probably wasting your time. You should probably go and work for another company. So I think this is where leadership from the top is very, very important. I haven't told anyone to leave any of your companies, I hasten to add. I haven't had those kind of conversations the last 2 days. The next one is also around leadership, but this is the people analytics leader themselves. So can they get things done and create value? Now, if you think about it, in many organizations, people analytics is almost like a startup within HR. Or it's certainly quite a new function that's growing in importance all the time, so it's scaling quite fast as well. So the skills required to take a leadership role there are probably quite different from the skills that you might have for your head of talent acquisition or your head of learning and development. So definitely looking out for that. Someone that's definitely passionate about analytics is very important. But if I show you from studies that we've done, 6 key skills that you would want in a people analytics team, and the boxes in green are ones that are particularly relevant for people analytics leaders. You don't necessarily have to have a people analytics leader who is a data scientist, for example. You don't even necessarily need to have a people analytics leader who's come from an HR background. It helps, to be honest, especially you're getting things off the ground because they've got existing relationships within HR as well, and they understand HR. But the skills that are really important are business acumen, financial literacy, clearly, an ability to translate analytics into a language that business leaders can understand and that are prepared to take action on. So that's all around the communications part. And then the consulting part. The consulting part is very important. So really understanding what is the problem that we're really trying to solve. And many of you will probably have heard of the 5 questions thing. To really unpeel that onion, to get to the real questions that you need to try and solve. Because sometimes you'll get a business problem that's confronted you. It might even be framed as a question. But actually you need to unpeel it 2 or 3 layers to really understand what are the questions that you're trying to solve. If you're in a people analytics team, or if you're a people analytics leader, you want access to all these different skills. You're not going to find one person, if you do, keep hold of them, who's got all of those skills. And when you're building that function, you may not be able to have all those skills within your team, but you can get access to these skills from elsewhere in the organization. So data science, and I'm going to walk through an example in a minute around that. Maybe you've got access to IO psychologists as well. And actually maybe to get things off the ground, I know organizations who've worked with consultancies as well to try and get that accelerator in progress. ABN AMRO, the bank in the Netherlands, is a good example of that. So this story is an example, and I'm going to frame it slightly differently to how I did yesterday. They didn't have a people analytics team when they put this in place. So they needed to borrow skills and data from elsewhere in the organization to try and test a hypothesis that the recruiting team had within Virgin Media. And their hypothesis was that we were providing such a bad candidate experience that customers of Virgin Media who were applying for jobs there were actually cancelling their subscriptions and going elsewhere to a Virgin Media competitor. So they took this hypothesis to the consumer analytics team. And the consumer analytics team, who were tasked with customer loyalty, customer satisfaction, and driving customer revenues, were actually quite interested to investigate this. So the HR team bought their recruiting data, they combined it with the customer data they had, and they came to an interesting insight. And that was that within 4 weeks of being in the recruitment process, over the course of a year, 7,500 customers had cancelled their subscriptions and probably moved elsewhere. They didn't know where they'd gone to, but they know they'd cancelled their subscriptions within 4 weeks of being in the recruitment process. So quite a strong correlation there. They calculated that this was costing them £4.4 million a year, so a significant amount. So with that insight, they then got the investment to go away and completely redesign the candidate experience. And what I really liked about this case study as well is they didn't just see it as a way to save money, they saw it as a way to actually potentially grow revenue as well. Because if we can actually not turn off customers during the recruitment process, how about we can excite people who aren't customers of Virgin Media by giving them such a great experience in the recruitment process, we can potentially convert them into customers as well, irrespective of whether they get the job. And they looked into academic research which showed them that they could potentially convert around 18 to 20% of non-customers into customers in a B2C organization, providing a great candidate experience. And that was an uplift of 5.6 million. So again, they turned something that was actually costing the company money into something that could potentially help make the organization more revenue. The sixth one is, and this is a challenge, and we did have a conversation about this certainly at lunchtime. Are your people analytics projects measured for return on investment? So, and you need to be thinking about this at the outset. So what I say there is actually sit down sometimes with finance and say, how are we going to measure the return on investment of this project? If you can agree that up front, then when you get to do the implementation and get to measure the outcomes, it's much easier to do it. So obviously you saw the potential ROI with the last one. There's a lot we can learn from marketing here. So we're going to play a bit of a video. Hopefully, can you play the video? Because I don't think it will work if I do it. Yep. Is it working? Let's see if it hurts when I click it. No, it doesn't work. There we are.
Snickers launched an advertising campaign in Australia in partnership with 7-Eleven that changes the price of the candy bar based on the
mood of the internet. And when anger goes up, Snickers prices go down.
Australia, get angry. Let's get those things down to 20 cents.
Introducing the Hungerithm, a hunger algorithm that linked price to people's real-time moods. As anger went up, prices went down at every 7-Eleven in Australia. Built on a 3,000-word lexicon from MIT, The Hungerism analyzed over 14,000 social posts a day to determine sentiment. It even understood sarcasm and slang, and not just any slang, Aussie slang. Prices updated 144 times a day, and users simply clicked Get a Snickers on the Hungerism mobile site to get a 7-Eleven barcode. No downloading apps or printing required. That would have just made them angrier. As prices dropped, fans were alerted via reactive social content, live in-store displays, and more.
Prices fluctuated wildly today, thanks largely
Visit
to
snickers.com.au.
Each new price had a backstory. Whether it was a politician saying something utterly stupid, people losing their minds over a show, or a country breaking up with the entire EU. The Hungerism turned the price of a candy bar into something people actually wanted to follow. Even Reddit liked it, and they hate everything. By changing its price over 5,000 times in 5 weeks, one of Australia's largest chocolate brands created a massive social media and PR spike. But one stat mattered most, a 67% sales increase. And for the first time, You're Not You When You're Hungry was linked to real-world mood and real-world sales. Snickers Hungerism. The angrier the internet, the cheaper the Snickers.
So, okay, relevance to HR perhaps, but it does show that you can really generate a lot of ROI out of analytics. It also shows the Australian sense of humour as well, and obviously it's designing things that work from a cultural perspective. So an example here of generating ROI is with Clark's. So Clark's run engagement surveys, like probably a lot of the organisations here do as well. And the chief HR officer there wanted to understand, is engagement a leading or a lagging indicator of business performance in our stores? i.e., does higher engagement drive higher business performance, or is it the other way around? And they actually found in Clark's that employee engagement did drive business performance in their retail stores, and there's about 500 of those stores in the UK. And they found that for every 1% of employee engagement, they drove a 0.4% increase in business performance, which actually translates to £68 million of annual revenue a year. So a big number for a retail organisation, certainly. And then what they did with this insight, they started to understand what are the key drivers of employee engagement in our stores. And the great thing about retail is you can compare high, medium, and low-performing stores because they're quite like for like. And they found 2 key drivers. One was around spans and layers, so how many people were reporting into a certain store manager or deputy store manager or unit manager. And the more people that reported into single managers, the lower the engagement, perhaps not surprisingly. And then the second one was around the tenure of the store manager. So if the shorter the tenure of the store manager, the more likely that it was going to drive engagement down. And this changed the strategy that they'd had previously of plucking high-performing managers from high-performing stores and putting into low-performing stores. They found that the uplift that they got in revenue was actually lower than the drop in revenue they got in the high-performing stores. And what this also enabled them to do from an HR perspective really is we really need to build engagement in as part of our store manager training program for existing store managers and prospective store managers as well. So again, showing the potential business value of analytics. And then the 7th one is probably the biggest challenge I think that organizations face when it comes to really being successful with people analytics. Can our HR business partners have evidence-based discussions? Are they enthused, equipped, excited, and enabled with what they need to do people analytics within the organizations? So this is a challenge. So it's all about how do we improve our HR business, the data literacy of our HR business partners? How can we make sure that they're asking the right questions of the business so they can help us identify what projects we should be doing, and then how can they translate the findings of those projects back to the business? And to be honest, a lot of that is the people analytics function and the HR business partners and the CHRO and HR leadership team working together to do that initially. There are a number of factors that influence this. We haven't got the time to go into it now, but it's not just around capability and confidence, it's around mindset. I see that as a real challenge. And it's around culture as well. So if we can put stuff in place which isn't just training, but it is structures within the organizations, and it's exciting people about it as well. Finding HR business partners who maybe are more data literate and using those as champions to try and help other HR business partners is certainly a way. Another way was this very innovative, and this is the final slide, so just about to finish on this. ABN AMRO, the Dutch bank I referred to earlier, they tried a number of different ways of enabling their HR business partners with analytics. They tried training, they tried videos and everything else. They actually created an escape room. Do you have escape rooms in India? So it's where you get locked in a room for an hour and you've got a series of problems that you need to solve to unlock the door and get out. So they applied this from an HR perspective, and you had the CHRO with giving you a video at the start telling you, I need some information in 45 minutes because there's a scandal about to break and I've got to face the press. And it's to do with how we've been treating our staff. And you've got a series of different data points on the table in front of you, and you need to help me craft a story that I can give to the media. And there were people from the people analytics team in there with the HR, the HR trainees effectively, helping them a little bit and guiding them along the way. And they found that this, A, they got some really interesting results from it. B, they found it really, really engaged the HR teams that are actually undertaking this training, and found that they were then getting far more questions around, look, how can we find out more about analytics? How can we make sure that we're asking the right questions in the business? So quite a small exercise, very creative, but a good way of creating that enthusiasm. I'll end with a quote from Josh, because he's speaking later, but I think it's a really pertinent one as well. So I think CHROs do understand the importance of people analytics, and CEOs certainly do. And if we're going to help our organizations confront the many challenges that we face now, and we're certainly going to face in the future, based on some of the stuff that Hod was certainly presenting this morning, then we really need to bring data and analytics to the table. So thank you very much. If you want to find out more, there's some links there. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you, David. Thank you for that fantastic presentation.